evening, everybody. Welcome to this general government meeting. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Dennehy.
Here.
Councilmember Schmisher. Here. Councilmember B. Smith. Absent. Councilmember Stein. Here. Councilmember Tracy.
Here.
Councilmember Worthington. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick.
Here.
Mayor Smith. Here.
Well, thank you all for coming and especially the members of our community. We love it when that happens. Ryan, you want to lead us off on this or what would you like?
Actually, maybe some comments from the city attorney. Catherine Sellers is online. This is a multiple trespass ordinance. We've received a lot of feedback from the community regarding folks who are trespassing on their property, and there are limited things that we can do. This provides another tool in the toolbox, I should say, and I'll let Catherine talk a little bit more about the details of how it works.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. So what the ordinance does is for someone's first offense for trespass, and that's the reference to chapter 9.40. So the first offense of the conviction of that section, the municipal court shall order that person to be prohibited from trespassing in the future. And the failure to comply with that order is in that section B in your ordinance. And sorry, excuse me. That section reference there where it says that the prosecuted as violations of 1.16.060. That is your contempt of court section in your municipal code. And so the judge is authorized to find that someone committed contempt of court and punish them pursuant to that section, which says that just so you have reference to it, there's a hearing component to that contempt of court section. There's a representation component for the defendant in that section, and then there's an imprisonment section, but it's limited to 5 days. So just so you have that information. I think this was requested by Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. I could be wrong about that, but again, like Ryan said, this is just a tool in the toolbox. Trisha wanted me to share with you, the city prosecutor wanted me to share with you her thoughts on it. Sorry, excuse me. She's supportive of it, but she does recognize that getting particularly transient individuals to court can be difficult. They just don't show, and so that's just an element for you to have in the back of your minds when considering and discussing this. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure I believe Judge Allen is there, and if he is, I'm sure he'd have something to contribute as well.
Before you go to Judge Allen, Catherine mentioned the imprisonment language in there. We have spoken to the county sheriff's office and county jail. The cost would be $120 per day per offender, plus any additional state mandated drug treatments that would have to go along with that. There are currently funds to assist with that part right now, but as those funds run out, that expense would be passed on to the city.
So
did I get all that correct, Ma'am Bro?
So there's a little bit more cost to that though, because there's a cost of your time to do the intake of a prisoner going to jail for a police officer. Like
if they go to jail, that cost is transferred to the detention staff. They're actually with the county.
okay, so you just have to bring them there.
We just gotta get them there. Yeah.
And
And
then
the cost is 120 per day.
yeah, plus medications. And so some of those medications have been expanded by the ADA to also include hydrocodone and methadone. And so we would be paying for people to have a night to get their free drugs.
Do we have a sense of what those expenses would be once the state funding ran out, or once the current funding ran out?
No, I don't have that number at this time.
Is that funding just for the medications?
It is, and it's currently being paid by the opioid settlement funds.
Because these, well, this is interesting because they're opioids.
Yeah. And I believe I've heard, Under Sheriff Urban say that, they expect or may see a cost of $1 million a year to comply with that, with those rules.
And the medications,
Yeah,
Just in here in Fremont or just the city or
well, that will be statewide. That's a
statewide? Okay.
statewide. But
Could I ask, I mean. I think jail may be an appropriate sanction in some cases, particularly those including property damage to private property. But I am concerned that, there are a lot of other cases where this going to jail wouldn't solve the underlying issue of homelessness or mental illness that I think we see in a lot of trespass cases. And I think it could exacerbate the issue or merely delay the issue by 5 days at a cost to the city. So I guess what I'd be curious to know is, as it's currently written, does this mandate that upon the second trespass, the judge must order this? Because I see a lot of shalls in here and not a lot of mays. So I want to understand if we're preserving Judge Allen's judicial discretion to make sure that he's able to apply, what's necessary based on the facts of individual cases.
If the ordinance says shall, it's mandatory. If it says may, I have discretion. So your level of discretion here is going to be with your prosecutor.
So,
Has shown really good discretion.
so I guess I would be a lot more comfortable with it being judicial discretion as opposed to prosecutorial discretion. So I would personally rather see some mays in here instead of shalls. So that our judge can exercise judicial discretion based on the facts of the case.
I may be able to maybe somewhat clarify that a little bit. So it does say they shall be prosecuted under your contempt of court provisions, but your contempt of court provisions do not mandate jail time. Jail time is an option for the judge to impose. The contempt procedures are not in your ordinance, they're in your code. They're separately. They're separate. They're not being amended by this ordinance.
Again, though, and as we just heard from Judge Allen, as it's drafted, it gives the prosecutor discretion, but doesn't necessarily give him full discretion. So I would
Well,
be a little.
here's what I'm saying. If the prosecutor decides that based on the individual's repeated action, it's appropriate to bring contempt, then we're going to have contempt. Now, we'll need a budget for defense counsel. We need some budget for the housing costs, because I'm going to add that if they're found to be guilty of contempt, the cost of their defense, the housing costs will be added to any fine that's imposed and sent to collections, where you may or may not collect. And if we just impose a fine, we send those to collections and we hope we collect it. A lot of these folks in this population are basically judgment-proof individuals. They have none. It's the old, how do you get blood out of a rock situation? Sad to say. But we're finding ourselves with many of the socially challenging issues, trying to find somewhere to find some relief. I've never been convinced that the court system is the best place to resolve social problems in the community. But there don't seem to be any other places, so it falls on us. We do our best. We just do our best.
And I think one of the things that we heard from our colleagues in North Glen, who we modeled some of the revamping of our co-responder program on, was using the judicial system to link individuals who need help to the services that they need help from. And I think that they were doing that through sentencing someone essentially to meet with a co-responder instead of sentencing them to meet with a probation officer, so that they're then able to connect them to the services that they need. Again, I think in some instances, absolutely jail time may be appropriate, but I also think that we've got a big swath of cases where like, we need other solutions. And I'm wondering if we should potentially look at that aspect of the North Glen model as well.
Judge Ellen, I have a question for you. I mean, a common problem that we've had is just frustration with one of the other underlying problems, and that's the state legislature and the laws that we have that don't allow us to have fines or to hold people in jail. And so it's just a matter of you arrest them, you put them in jail, they get a free night, a free meal, a bed, and then you get methadone, you're out the next day, and then repeat, you're just coming back over and over again. Do you see
Well-
this as potential of also?
That's not
Just go ahead.
exactly how it goes. On everything we see in a municipal court, when we issue a bench warrant, it has to have a personal recognizance bond pre-approved.
So can you explain that more?
Yes, I'm not gonna be able to issue a bench warrant that requires them to post cash or surety unless you're willing to have me on call and a city prosecutor on call to have a hearing within 48 hours. So the solution to that, we have a failure to appear, we issue a new bench warrant, and it's a pre-approved personal recognizance bond. About the only time we see those people again is if they're being held on more serious charges in the county jail, and then we transport them over. And we almost always get a resolution by agreement, very seldom have a trial. But until they are in custody on a state charge, very difficult for us to get most of the folks in court.
So even just to get them to court is gonna be.
Into court. There are folks who are, for example, repeated shoplifters. And they post the PR bond, don't show up, and a lot of times they'll also have an arraignment on a new case. So I'm issuing a bench warrant for all their prior non-appearances and the new case. Some people get up 4, 5, 6, 7 PR bonds at a time. It drives law enforcement crazy. It's already driven me crazy. I'll just live with it. It's one of the duties of my job, and that's how law enforcement deals with it. They'd rather have it any other way, but that's the law, and they're gonna follow it. Our law enforcement, our police department does a very good job, in my opinion.
So if you were able to get somebody into your court, do you see tools of like issuing, like you, in order to avoid going to jail for 5 days, you have to meet the co-responder, or you have to go to Sylvester, or go to detox, or, having other things?
That would be a
actually
good tool to try. The thing you would worry about is if you order them to do that, you set a review date, and they don't meet with anyone, they fail to appear at the next review date, we're back to the bench warrant with pre-approved. Which is why I have knots in my head for pounding my head against the wall in frustration.
Yeah.
And Ms. Sellers can certainly tell you how city attorneys feel about that. It drives them absolutely bonkers too.
So I've got a question. If a citizen calls for a trespass and the trespass has had an order from the court to not trespass anymore, is it within your purview to involve co-responders at that time, or how does that thought process or decision process work?
Well, it's gonna depend on the individual. If they're, if they're already in the program, or if we have established that they might have needs that program might suit. If that makes any sense.
So if you.
The co-responder program is more to ensure that people get mental health treatment. When they're experiencing that mental health issue. And unfortunately, it's pretty rampant today. And I don't know that you deal with very many people that don't have a mental health issue, at least an underlying one. That is helping to facilitate their behavior.
And the money in the programs for this aren't within the municipality. They're with the state. They're with the county and state.
So you're saying we wouldn't have access to the money?
Well, under this plan, unless they volunteer to take part in some long-term treatment program for mental health and drugs, it's hard for a court that's a municipal court with those limitations to be the supervising court over state and county programs. That's more appropriately done in the state system.
So can you tell us what's happening today? If there's somebody trespassing in private property, what's the process?
Well, the process can be simple or it can be really complicated, but if we get, so say we get a call for somebody trespassing at, on somebody's land. If they want to pursue charges right away, we just go contact the person and we write them a ticket, they go to court. They get a court date. That doesn't necessarily mean that they go to court, because we can't, a first offense for trespass, and especially in municipal ordinance, we don't take people to jail. They get a ticket. The ticket requires their mandatory appearance. What we are finding is that most of the people that we are coming in contact with who violate those types of ordinances, they just don't go to court. So later, we'll get another report on them somewhere else. It'll be at a different location sometimes it's at the same location, but then we'll contact them again. Now they have a new trespass that we can cite them for. Plus, they have typically a failure to appear bench warrant that was issued by the municipal judge. At which point we write them a PR bond right there on the side of the road and tell them, here's your new court date for that one, here's your new court date for your new trespass, and then they end up not going to court. This is where we start. And as we start working our way down the road with this person, if they start committing offenses against the public property and things like that, we have some different things that we can do, like unlawful conduct on public property, and then we can actually charge them into the state court for that. And we can get them in, get them to a jail facility, at which point they're incarcerated. And hopefully are still there by the time their court dates come back around, so that they can go see an answer to the charges that they have all those warrants for.
So it has to be like a destruction of property for you to actually arrest them.
Typically, it requires something to get out of hand and violent.
And not just destruction of property. If I heard you right, destruction of public property.
Well,
No.
not necessarily. I'm saying like, if we have like people who are inside and violating the ordinances of like our public parks and that type of thing, we have some leeway as far as which court we're going to charge those things into. And with the large amount of failures to appear, it compounds and the judges on that side of things will see that, and they should hold them. I don't know that they can in all cases.
Does this actually change? Like, would this actually change anything? then?
So I think I can ask that question in a different way. That may help here. So in the case that you just talked about, so we have someone, they get their first ticket, okay, they reoffend, they get their second ticket. At that point, without a person in front of you, is there action that you can take, Judge Allen?
Well, if they don't appear, it's the bench warrant with pre-approved PR.
Okay, so to follow up on that, and so they would have to show up in court to be able to trigger the contempt charge.
Well, you could have the contempt charge filed,
Yes. So that's my question.
and then they'll get a notice to come in for advisement on that. If they come, if they don't, it's going to be a bench warrant with a pre-approved personal recognizance bond. And we're back to where we are,
And
same situations on the shoplifting.
I think the way that it's currently worded, though, it's upon the first conviction thereof. So I think that they would actually have to be convicted of the first
Has
offense,
to be
right?
convicted of the first and then the second. This is basically a form of sentence enhancer. I think it's a fair way to describe
So
it.
if they never show up for the first, you
Yeah,
can't charge
we
them.
still
with
have it.
contempt.
No,
You gotta get a conviction on the first to trigger this.
so
And there are people we have that are far enough into the system, this could apply to them, but I think this is going to apply to cases in the future, not involve past conduct. I don't think this has any retroactive application.
right.
So to be going forward,
And you do see that there would be some applications, some individuals that fall under this.
there are some folks who will show up. That there are people who have the responsibility in them, even though they've committed an offense, to show up. And they're the easiest people to work with. They're usually the ones who will comply with the court's order. Percentage wise, there may be 10% of the population that gets cited. The population that gives us the issue, I see frequently in other cases in the district court too. And they have co-occurring mental health and substance abuse disorders, severe. And the poor officers, you know, they're out there 24/7, trying to resolve situations, you know, at the curb. I'm glad I don't have their job.
The 5 to 10% that you think actually would show up that are the responsible ones, is sentencing them to 5 days in jail likely to produce the end result that we want in the future, which is that they don't trespass anymore? Or do they also have these underlying issues to where?
Probably wouldn't have much effect on. If it was extremely cold weather, they might appreciate 3 hot meals and a dry place to stay and shower.
May I ask, so do you see any advantage to this for that 90% that's not? I mean,
If it works in some percentage and has a positive outcome, I think it's worth our going forward. But I don't want anyone to have
No.
colored glasses on about this, and I want everyone to understand, you need to be prepared to have a budget for defense counsel and housing costs.
yeah, and that's,
I think we need a much better cost estimate done, because it's not just $120 a day.
Well, we wouldn't have to pay for any of their treatment. If someone's going to be in jail for not more than 5 days, when they're in jail, they've got an obligation to take care of the medical.
Well, I think we've heard from the county, though, that they are expecting us, once the opioid settlement comes out, to pay for those costs.
Well,
There's
they
a
might
chance
have.
those funds could last for a long time, though.
oh, well,
Well, but
The
so,
Lloyd ones,
yeah.
yeah.
so I have another question. It's kind of off what we've been discussing here a little bit. So if someone appears in front of you, Judge Allen, and is convicted of an offense that requires incarceration, there is a Canyon City officer or a sheriff's officer that's present in the court to take that person into custody.
That's what we would need.
So is it, there's
Well,
none right now?
the sheriff's not gonna have someone in the courtroom.
Yes.
We're gonna have an officer, and normally we do have an officer present, because we need that for security.
Sure.
We're finding a little more dangerous population in the courtroom than in years past.
Wow, yeah, so, but if there's an officer present, then that officer could take that person into custody, transport them across the street.
Yes.
But the housing cost you're referring to is, what is that?
Well, Brian Stevens said,
That's the jail.
That's the jail, that's for
that's
the,
the jailing cost,
The fee for the
100,
jail.
120 a day.
Do you have a sense on the representation? Like, is it actually available in a timeframe that would?
It's gonna be challenging to find someone. And when you do, I would hope if you get them to agree to do it for maybe 125 an hour. They'd have to discount their normal rates. I think your average hourly rate in Canyon City in successful private practice is about $350.
so if we enact this and we are dissatisfied, you're dissatisfied, the police department is dissatisfied, for whatever reason, whether it's financial or whatever, we would have the opportunity to repeal this version of the ordinance.
And while you're waiting, you could tell your city prosecutor, don't take any action under this ordinance, please. That's a
Well,
good
since
case.
the only way to be really effective is if you consistently apply it, so that there's knowledge that there will be consequences if this is violated. But I'm concerned, though, that 5 to 10% that adhere to it, if you're spending thousands of dollars to put them in jail for 5 days, that thousands of dollars, if they have a desire to do what's right, could be better spent helping them get their life put on. a
What I would
trajectory.
probably do with that fact situation, because I get the general drift of it, is say, I'm going to impose a fine of X number of dollars, X number of days, but I'm gonna stay in the jail. And I'm gonna stay the fine on the condition you don't have any further violations in the next 12 months. If you do, we're gonna have a due process hearing and you'll serve the penalty. And for those who are responsible enough to come in, I think that's all it would take with them.
But they would still need a defense attorney at that time for that,
But you'd
that
have
conversation.
some costs.
And you could stay it and order them to, you know, we have the co-responder program to meet with the co-responder and access services.
But I'll tell you, I wouldn't put someone in jail for failing to speak with co-responders. When someone turns down help that's offered, when they need help, that's not something you can solve with punishment. That's only addressed with treatment.
My feel is that you get somebody who actually does follow up and does come to the court date. It's almost like we're punishing them, and they're the ones that have, you know, yeah, they screwed up to begin with, but they're also the ones that have actually followed through and showed up. When you start pulling this other stuff on them, to me, I think we're almost getting, again, the wrong percentage of the people that are the offenders.
We're trying to address those who are the really bad offenders that don't care about the law, don't care about coming to court, don't give a flip about much of anything. And those are the ones that are causing us the most hassle. I mean, we have a ton of tools right now available for anyone who has a desire to make their life better. There's a ton of tools out there to help them make their life better.
But-
It's that population that are being extremely difficult. And I don't know if I'm
This is
convinced
gonna-
if this is going
I
to make the
agree.
difference that we need, those tools that we need to help motivate them to finally choose to
It's-
start doing
It's,
better.
it's no different than anybody doing anything. You have to want to do it. Alcoholism, drug, anything. You have to want to get out of it, period. So you cannot make anybody do it. I know this. Personally,
Well, I've been sober 34 years
okay,
and
fantastic.
I understand addiction.
Yeah.
Because I'm an addict to alcohol. Now, I'm fortunate, I haven't touched a drop in 34 years. I could fall off the wagon tomorrow. That's the attitude I have to maintain my sobriety.
Right. Right,
It's challenging, it's very challenging.
but nobody made you quit. There might have been some
I didn't quit
circumstances.
for anybody, I quit for myself.
Exactly, that's what I'm
I
saying.
quit for myself.
That's what I'm saying.
And I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't, I'd be dead, I
Right.
died years ago.
So either of you gentlemen, is this something that you need, that you think would be a good tool? I mean, is it gonna make your job any easier or better?
It could help in some cases, and it doesn't hurt to have additional tools in the toolbox. And I trust the discretion of our city prosecutor to be a gatekeeper on that issue. She's got a good sense of that. She really does. Sometimes I have to throttle the attorneys back on things, but that's all of it. When you're in my position, you always find that the right answer is usually somewhere in between the prosecution and the defense's idea.
And so, it's useless for us to pass this if you guys can't use it somehow. If it's not something that you want in your toolbox.
Well, it has some potential if law enforcement believes it'll help them on the street. I think that's a stronger consideration than the effect on the court system.
Right. So I think that would be my decision on whether to move ahead with this is, can they use it? Because if it's just for us to say we did it, that's
No,
crazy.
Not interested.
Because we, you know,
It's gonna help.
One more thing to remember.
It's not gonna make you, is it?
Tell us from your experience with boots on the
Well,
ground.
so the process would be like the first offense, you have to get the conviction, then you have to catch an in contempt, then there's a hearing on that. And then there would be an order for them to go to jail. It's not something that we would actually enforce, right?
Well, who's picking up most of the books you get to court? It's the county. Generally, isn't it? On
Well,
more serious charges?
on the more, no, we're usually putting them in jail on the county
Are you?
charges.
Okay, well,
However,
that's good.
I mean, to that degree, I guess that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I have had success along these same lines when we had more stricter sentencing guidelines. Because when people are faced with jail time, they don't want to stay in jail necessarily. And so they start finding ways to move along or especially if they know that there are multiple places throughout the city that they're no longer welcome.
Yeah, and that worked back before the legislature
Correct.
got us to the point where we can't put someone in jail with a cash or surety bond requirement and keep them there for a couple of days till we can get to them.
The truth of the matter is that most of our most prolific offenders are literally trespassed from everywhere.
Right.
They're trespassed from all the gas stations, most of the grocery stores, if not all of them. They're in, and we catch them in the act of trespassing all the time, and all we can do is continue to write more tickets and.
But even if you caught them and it went on. I mean, what are the odds that some of them being able to pay? The ones that are prolific like you're talking about,
Well, none of them can pay.
none of them.
But we still have this issue with the state legislature that changed the law, so we can't hold them. And
It's going to be
really-
a long time before the state changes their laws on that.
So I'd say, so that's the same. So you said that like it was really effective beforehand. But
If-
even if we change this, it's still gonna be ineffective because of
State law
the state law.
drives, state law drives.
I thought I saw something on CML that somebody had a proposal to put those bonds back in, but I don't know the likelihood of that passing.
Yeah. So to me, this seems like a really close call. Because, you know, there's, on this hand and on that hand, issues that we're looking at, and if it doesn't make a difference or cannot, let me see if I can say this right. If it could make a difference in a few cases that the police department had to deal with on the street, I would be in favor of doing something. Okay, because what we're hearing is that there is discretion involved, discretion about whether to bring charges or not. There's discretion, once there's contempt, there's discretion that, different actions may happen, including the jail time. So I think we've got the discretion part covered, but nonetheless, you know, if it's something that doesn't make a difference, Judge Allen says it can help in some cases. And so that's encouraging.
I don't know if we got a clear answer from Commander Bell if he would actually use the tool.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, a contempt of court order is the judge's order. We would have to enforce the law. To be frank, it's another tool that we can use. I mean, the straightforward answer is that anything that we can put in our tool belt to help resolve these types of things, the police department's all for it. Because right now, I mean, we're just kicking the can down the road, as you know, the chief puts it all the time.
Well,
And hang on a second, please, let's get to Emily because she's got her hand up.
Hi, I'm here. I haven't heard this question well, first I'll say it that if this tool would have some potential use, then I'd be in favor of doing it. But I haven't heard this question asked, and that is there a way to write this ordinance that doesn't require someone to show up in court and be convicted? Can you instead write it, and I don't know this, the lawyers or whoever can answer this, can it be written so that it doesn't require a conviction? Instead, well, I don't even know how you'd write it. I was about to say just with X number of citations for trespassing, could there be but you have to have the conviction. So I'm answering my own question, I guess.
Had heard it out loud.
And man,
Sure.
I guess, I'm not leaning for this. But I guess I'll lean with our police department. And that's the bottom line, that, I'm in full support of what or any tools that our police department would say that would help them. And if this even helps, I think 10% would even be on the high end.
1 out of 100.
But if you think it would give you a little bit more, then I'm for it. I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to for me right now is if this helps our police department, I'm 100% for it.
I'd like to hear from our citizens that have come.
Sure, yeah.
I have a question. I apologize for my elementary question here. I'm new to the whole Canyon City rules and laws. You know that if you stay at one of the shelters or get services at some of the different places in Canyon City, if you have a felony warrant or bench warrant, you're not allowed to get those services. You're not welcomed at Loaves and Fishes, or you're not welcomed at other places. Is if they have an issue with a bench warrant or trespassing, would that mean that they would not be allowed at the shelter?
Question.
I've never heard that.
There are people that are not allowed at the shelter because they're wanted for one thing or
Well,
another.
Because of their actions while they're there, probably.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
That's the only thing I've heard in the past.
I have heard, and I used to work there, and I had heard, people say that, no, they can't come because they have a bench warrant out for them. They're not welcomed here. They have to have an ID. Somebody has to vouch for them. If they're wanted, they cannot stay here. So I'm just wondering if somebody's got a citation out, didn't show up, are they then not allowed to stay at one of our shelters because they have a bench warrant against them?
Sounds like it might be a shelter policy, not necessarily a rule or regulation of the city.
Yeah, I'll
But
give you an
it would
example.
be something that
If
we
you have-
know
if
before
you
we
have
pass.
a-
Could have an unintended
If
consequence.
you have,
Right.
if you have a case at the Department of Human Services, child welfare case, if you're going to one of the treatment agencies, if you have an outstanding warrant, the Department of Human Services and the treatment agency aren't going to call law enforcement to come get you. They're gonna take you and give you the treatment, give you visitation, parenting time with the child.
So we still
And
need
I
to,
thought the shelter probably had the same similar type of policy.
I think we better clarify that because, I mean, best case scenario is that if they're at Loaves and Fishes, then they're getting the wraparound services they need to start making those better choices in their life and to go get detox and go get their mental health and get on their medications. So if we're doing something that's gonna prevent them
Right.
from getting those wraparound services that help them make their life better, that's something we need to
That would
consider.
be my biggest concern, is I would hate for somebody to have a trespassing charge, whether it be 1 or 2. They're easy to get, and I've never had them, but they can't be that hard to get. If you have a few of them and you decide that you need help, or you need to get out of the weather, or you need to go to rehab, or you need to change your life, or whatever it is that you decide that you want to do. And the first step is go to the homeless shelter to get help. And they're like, no, you trespassed twice, got a bench warrant out for you, you can't stay here, figure something out though.
Well, I'll tell you what I'd do if they came to court
And
and
if they go to
said, put
court,
me on the docket. First thing I'd do is I'd say, well, if you're really interested in this, here's what I'll do. We'll give you a personal recognizance bond, so you don't have outstanding warrants. City prosecutor says they're gonna file a contempt action against you, but we will set it out about 3 months or 2 months. We'll have some reviews in between now and then. And if you engage in services between now and then, and you're successful, and we track it with the review hearings, the city attorney might well decide to drop the contempt. Well, that'd be a success story.
Right.
So that might be one way to work with an agency that doesn't have the same type of more lenient rules as the treatment providers in the Department of Human Services. There's always a way to manipulate these things.
Right, and like I said, I'm very elementary to this system here, and I don't know as much as I should. I hate to see somebody get turned away from services because of a trespassing.
Well, and we can definitely check with Loaves and Fishes.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows Edie, everybody
Absolutely.
can pick up the phone and give her a call and find that out. I just didn't know if anybody around the table would answer that question.
I haven't asked her that specific question. I did chat with her or exchange messages with her about this ordinance. She wanted to be here tonight, but it Lives and Fishes board meeting night, so she wasn't able to be. She did mention, again, I didn't ask her that specific question. I'm sorry, Lori. But she did mention that Lives and Fishes and UCOG have recently received a new grant where they get or where they've received 20 housing vouchers with intensive wraparound services, including bridge housing, which is that like magical nights in a hotel room until the housing voucher can actually be redeemed, because I know it's really hard to redeem those in our area. And that 10 of those are for judicially involved individuals, and that 10 of them are for those with significant mental health or substance abuse issues. So I think that that could potentially be I mean, for folks who are judicially involved because of trespassing, because they're homeless and they don't have anywhere else to go. She mentioned that that could potentially be a really good resource for them, and was even curious if Loaves and Fishes personnel, like a case manager, would be able to meet with them while they are in the county jail during that 5-day period to see, you know, if they would be a good match for this particular program so that they had somewhere to go when they were released.
If something like that was established, I would try to set it up where they could meet with them without having to go to jail.
Yeah,
So the city's not paying the 120.
sure. And so that they don't have the, you know, experience in jail if it's unnecessary for the facts of the case.
This population has no fear of jail. To them, it's a mini vacation. It really is. It's sad, but it is. They don't have to make any decisions. They're fed, they get a shower,
They're warm.
they're warm, clean clothes. There's just no way to get compliance by intimidating them by saying, now, I might impose jail here. They're gonna go, well, it's getting pretty hot. That doesn't sound bad.
Could I ask?
Where's the deterrent value there?
Could I ask then, if there isn't a deterrent value from your experience, is there the potential for a perverse incentive here?
A what?
A perverse incentive here?
I still get
A perverse incentive,
Okay, a reverse incentive?
perverse incentive,
Perverse?
to where people are actually wanting to be found in contempt of court so that they can go to
Well,
jail.
there could be cases where they would do, it's like the individual sitting down on the curb and eating the food, and making sure that they've done enough damage that they were gonna go to jail. That story. Let's just say that's probably not the individual I heard the story about, but I've heard that story many times in my career.
And just to backtrack a little, and I can't speak for sure about Loaves and Fishes, but I'm just thinking from my memory, the only time I've heard of them turning people away is if they are convicted sex offenders. I'm not saying that, you know, if this applies or not, but I do know that one's for sure.
And it might also, I'm trying to remember too, I'm thinking that I've also heard that that they're not allowed to be using drugs while they're there. And if they refuse to, I think that might be the other key one that they don't allow.
Sobriety and sex offender.
Yeah.
I think the rule in the past was always they couldn't use drugs on premises, but if they left during the day and they used someplace else, if you just came back and went to bed, didn't cause any problems, you would still get to keep your bed. If you came back and you caused a problem, you're gonna be asked to leave. That's how it worked in the past.
If to get into the door when
Right.
it opens in the evening, it has to pass a drug test, no one would need to cook anyone's supper.
Right.
And it's sad that, I mean, that's.
No, you're
that's-
100% correct.
That's the society we have today.
We have another
Yeah, no.
citizen that hasn't spoken yet.
I just wanted to really clarify, after the 5 days in jail, are they guaranteed to have the court hearing within that time period? Or if they just do the 5 days and then they're out, then we're just in kind of this repeating cycle?
Yeah.
Under this plan, you'd have the repeating cycle.
Could you have as part of the sentence that after the 5 days in jail that they have to meet with the co-responder?
Well, that's where I would say, I'm not gonna make a decision on the jail, provided you do the following. And try to, in a positive way, but it's, whenever you hear the term manipulation, you think negative, but there's positive ways to manipulate people for their benefit too. And you try to maximize that as much as possible. I mean, that's what we do.
But I hear you. I mean, it certainly seems like a revolving door potential.
Presumably, I think this is what you guys are getting at is, you know, convicted of contempt, they spend the 5 days in court or in jail. The multi trespass ordinance that could, you know, that order, they go and trespass as soon as they get out of jail.
And if they get
back in the
convicted,
process again.
that it'd probably be just, it's another 5 days.
At the $500 or no, more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, 650.
And here again, on the financial
25.
side, you're not gonna recover any of this money.
Yeah,
You'll occasionally find a collection agency to get someone wins the lottery or something to get impounded or other benefits, but,
But then it's
It's a
also,
challenge.
I mean, if they are trying to scrape enough money together for first month, last month, and, you know, security deposit to actually not have to trespass anymore and have a place to stay, and they have all of these fines.
depends on where they find the money, does.
And
And that could lead to another set of problems on how many drugs they need to sell to get that, if that's the lifestyle they lead.
right.
Can you talk a little bit about other reasons people are trespassed? It's not just for a place to stay. People get trespassed for shoplifting and,
Oh, yeah.
you know, various reasons.
Anytime somebody gets picked up for shoplifting in any one of our establishments, the management usually asks us to give them a formal notice of trespass. That way, if they come back, there's 2 charges against them and not just one, and if you get enough of those, you could even be talking about something where it could potentially get into the realm of what we consider a burglary, which is unlawful trespass with the intent to commit a crime.
And that's a state charge in the state court.
We've always been able to be successful around here with that, but yeah, no, trespass is for a whole lot of different reasons.
Can you name some others?
So like the city market shopping center, all of the surrounding parking lot and all of that. We have an agreement with the management there. If they call us and ask us to trespass somebody who may be engaging in activity that they don't permit, like panhandling, we're allowed to be able to go out there and trespass those people on behalf of management. They don't want you out here panhandling from their customers. It's not against the law. It provides them an opportunity to leave the property, and it tells them that they violated the rules. Now, if they come back, they're trespassing. It's not that you're enforcing the panhandling, because panhandling in and of itself is not against the law. It's the rule that they're breaking.
Do
That's,
you have to wait for the store owner to call you, or can you, with that standing agreement, can you do it at any time?
it depends. We have had a standing agreement with the management there, but from time to time, we try to refresh it. And if they don't reach out to us enough, we feel like we're the ones pushing it, and then we're like, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And then we back off a little bit, and then they come back to us and they're like, you guys aren't doing what you should. So it's kind of one of those, we get caught up in a whole thing about, but, yeah, that's another example. Camping.
What
they're
about-
camping in a particular spot, they're littering, they're doing all this other stuff, we may actually trespass them from that particular area rather than, clean up your property, get it out of here. Trespass them from that particular location, and if they come back, it's another, then it's the criminal act.
If somebody is homeless, is there anywhere that they're allowed to be in the city? Where?
Yeah, they can camp anywhere on public property. As long as they're within the rules, but of that particular public property. Does that make sense? So like, for instance, the Supreme Court's been very clear about camping on public property. It's not against the law for people to seek shelter and that type of stuff. However, along with camping usually comes defecation, urination, littering, that type of stuff. So we'll enforce that particular side. Then it becomes a rule also. So like the people that go and hang out on the stage, if that's park, there's a permit to use that stage. You have to have a permit. There's a rule for that. So we will go in, we will enforce that rule. You have to have a permit to occupy the space on stage. Move along.
But they could be in a different city park as long as they were not violating any of
Oh,
the.
they're allowed to be in the park.
Yeah, they could just get off the stage.
They just,
But the reason they like to be on the stage, and I've heard some, it's been a while since they explained this to me. But they said, in order to avoid assaults, we get together and we protect each other. And it's easier to do on the stage because you've got a wall behind you.
and I don't know that
And
I
you hear that?
necessarily believe that, but most of the time when they're up on the stage, they're using the electric outlets to try to charge their phones and that type of thing.
Or it's raining.
There's some shelter, yeah, from the elements a bit.
A good, another good
I-
example. I'm sorry.
I just throw the circuit breaker on that.
Well,
That
and we
was my
have.
concern.
We have, that's actually what we started doing, and then that kind of hurt the issue, but. Like a good example would be the Bank of the San Juans. They called us one day, we went over there, and there were people who actually had a full-blown, full-size coffee pot plugged in to an outside outlet and using it on their property without any, nobody's permission. They're just over there. So then they're not necessarily breaking the law. I guess you could say that they're stealing electricity, but the management asks us, get these people off of our property. We don't want them. So then we give them a notice of trespass. Can't be here anymore. Because it's an area that's open to the public, it welcomes the public, but at the same time, they want you to, respect their property. And so the very first time that we deal with somebody, it's always a matter of warning them about the rules and making sure that if the management wants them gone, that they're no longer allowed to be there. And so we've done these trespass notices. We've taken whatever steps that we can there.
Well, and that's another conversation of the potential fence at Depot Park, so it separates that line, like there's a clear boundary. Private property here, public property here.
Yeah, see that.
You can go through various scenarios till it drives you crazy.
Well, and that's what's frustrating is because we're really wanting to have an effective tool to deal with people who are repeatedly violating the law and causing a really significant nuisance to our private property owners. And I want to find that golden ticket to make that happen. And I don't know if I'm feeling super confident that this is going to accomplish what we really need to do. Especially at $350 an hour for defense attorney.
Well, we would need to find someone who's trying to get established who can't command that much. We'd have to find our adequate representation, but not Cadillac representation.
So on the issue of representation, Judge Allen, what role, if any, the public defender's office? Is that
Public defenders do not appear in municipal court.
do not appear in these?
You can stay on.
Mhm. Okay,
The bigger towns have their own probation departments and public defenders. But those are big towns, big tax base, big budgets. And, you know, we think of Canyon City as being pretty fair sized. We're pretty rural, very rural.
So to go from here. The count, I think it would have to be, this bill would need to be sponsored by 3 council members to go to a city council meeting for further debate, is that right? Ryan?
Yeah, you can either have more, set up a committee of council members, 2 council members. And staff to work on it more. You could, as is, or some minor tweaks, you could have 3 council members sponsor it. Or we table it for now and hold on to it for a later date if things, if you want to wait and see how things. There's another reason to bring it back.
so that really is the question, and I think that's where we kind of end up tonight, which is, do any council members think that there are further tweaks that we need to make to this ordinance? I mean, is there anybody that believes that we can make it more golden than what it is now by tweaks? And Emily, sure.
Yeah, I don't have a tweak, but I have a statement, I guess. I think we've heard kind of different things from the police department and the municipal judge, and I really appreciate hearing all of that. It sounds like there's a potential for this kind of ordinance to be a tool, but on the other hand, there's the recognition that if you don't get someone to appear and get a conviction, then it really isn't a tool or even a threat. And so I'm just kind of stuck in that dilemma that we kind of know what the problem is, but we don't have a solution, doesn't sound like, or we haven't thought of it yet. So I really have mixed feelings about it. As I said earlier, I would support this if folks thought it would be a useful tool, even though it's imperfect, but I'm not sure it will accomplish anything.
And if I may, I agree with what Emily was saying. And the other thing that I'm concerned about, and just because it's the small percentage that are actually gonna go with this, is the cost when it does go to jail. All of a sudden with our homeless, and if that adds up, if they go to their first and they go and then they have to, which is the big question. Then when they go again, that's our citizens who are picking up this cost of somebody who realistically is not gonna care. And that's unfortunate. And like I said, Loaves and Fishes does a fantastic job. But then again, it's the people who want to will take advantage of anything. The people who don't, you can fine them all you want, you can do all you want, and nothing's gonna happen.
I second that.
And from my perspective, I'm willing to listen to Judge Allen and our police department, that if they think that this is another tool in their tool belt, I think it would be worth the risk of excessive costs to give it a try, maybe closely monitored. Because we don't want to, we wouldn't want to break the piggy bank here, but that may be a minority position, and I'm good with that. But this is something I think that it would be worthwhile to proceed on.
Well, and I'm gonna say what I said. But I also agree with John, because also listening to our police department and anything, again, these are the people who it's gonna deal with. Money wise, yeah, it's the city, but right now it's the police department who's dealing with this, and
another thing, John, that I would like to say is that you and I have been through many meetings, a lot of the other people here, where we've listened to literally over 100 of our citizens about how frustrated they are.
Yeah.
And I'd hate to either, can this or delay it forever, because of we need to respond to their needs too, because they're frustrated. A lot of them, they're older, they're frightened. I think maybe this might be something we could say, it's a new tool in the toolbox that we can say that we're trying. And if it does, if we end up spending more than we can afford, because we are a little rural area, we just don't, when I decided to run, my idea was to keep the lights on. I mean, really, we don't have unlimited funds to do these things. But I do think that this would be kind of a response for the people that, the people who live here that are upset. And some businesses that are having problems too, that we're, there's no ultimate solution. Because if there were, other towns would be using it too. When I go to Denver, it's like they're struggling as well as we are. So, but if you guys said, I would be inclined to table it, but I think that we've heard tonight that it's another tool that might help them. So, yeah,
On the other hand,
yeah.
I agree in that respect.
Yeah, like it gives a really frustrated population, like here you put in another tool. Which fills me with lots of warm fuzzies. But is it really gonna?
I guess.
But is it
I
an
like
effective
that,
tool?
that if there's a way to closely monitor it for say a year. And then, let's go back and look at it, because, I sit there and I say, I hate to put something into an ordinance. It's gonna maybe help have something to do with 2 people out of 200. I'm not sure that's worth it, but if it's a tool that is at least there and we see that we have 10 or 20 that it maybe had some effect on, then I have no issues with that. So, but I would like to have it monitored and just make sure that, and get your feedback, both of your feedback to say, hey, did this have any positives out of it or not? So.
Have an opinion?
I am all for giving our police department and our municipal court additional tools. It seems like maybe they could potentially be helpful in very, very limited situations. I'm concerned again that it could exacerbate the issue that we already have, that it could be a perverse incentive where people may actually want to seek it out. I'm concerned that we don't actually know the costs. I would want to have a much better understanding of the estimated cost per person. And I also just don't yes, it might be a response, and yes, I definitely heard that people are very upset, especially about destruction and damage to private property, and that is unacceptable. I don't know that this particular tool will actually solve that problem, and I am concerned that if we need to try. Can I finish? Yeah, we need to try. Can I finish?
Well, we prefer the term,
Councilwoman Stein.
we prefer the term iatrogenic effect to the perverse term. And it just means when you try to do something good, but you end up harming the person more than helping them. That's the iatrogenic effect.
Please continue.
Go ahead.
It just sounds more socially accepting.
Unintended consequences.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I am very concerned about that, and I also am concerned that if we do something that is an attempt to be responsive to people and to their concerns, but that it doesn't actually have the intended effect, that we will, in our minds, have checked a box that is not actually checked because the issue has not actually been solved. And we are not actually making the significant change that we would like to make. So those are my concerns.
I understand those concerns. I think Councilwoman Worthington's suggestion that it be closely monitored and that we, give our direction both to the court and the department to be prepared to come back in a year and discuss with us what has happened. That may be a way to go forward. another way to say it is, even if you could only help 1 out of 100 with this, would it be worth it? And so, you know, then we don't know. We don't know. I mean, it's hard to know. It is, like I say, it is a close call.
And it 1 out of 100.
But what you have.
But the cost is there also that is being paid for by the whole group of citizens.
How much does that one have a hundred?
Right, what does that 1 in 100 cost?
We do employ a police department, so, you know, we do spend a lot of money there.
Right.
1 out of 100 may be $2,000.
Could we, in addition to putting a time limit on it, also put a monetary cap on it if we're unable to give a good cost estimate?
Well, yeah, as far
In
as,
terms of we will review before we get to this cap?
yeah, as far as this ordinance goes, there's a whole bunch of steps that we have to do on the administrative side. So we would have to bring budget amendments to city council because we did not budget for jailing or defense counsel or any
Right.
of these other additional expenses. So, you know, it may be a month or more before you actually see this because we're gonna have to go out to additional research and things like that and prepare budget amendments and all those types of things. And if, you know, if you wanted a cap, that's where we would put it. We would put it in as part of the budget and we, you know, it would get capped out and then you'd have your review period.
So, but if we hit the cap, what would you suppose might happen? I mean, how would we handle that? That's kind of the crux of the issue.
I think we'll be waving the flags probably at, you know, different.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, we'll just be waving the flags at different different mile markers as
Sure.
far as that budget goes, because, you know, we'll have an idea of basically the run rate of how quickly we're going through that
Your
budget.
safety net is tell your city prosecutor, don't bring these.
Well, that's the thing, though, is if you're gonna do it, you have to do it, you have to go 100% and do it consistently and not have a break on the budget pause. You gotta go for it.
Right.
And so we'd have to have enough notice to do a review. just like
Or
this
enough
with your mouth.
notice to take action,
Yeah,
to repeal or something like that.
so, you know, one way or the other, we're either gonna have to come back to city council and say, this isn't working, we need to end the program, or we're gonna have to come back to city council and say, we need more money.
More money.
And that we are seeing some benefit.
Well, if we're suddenly seeing a big uptick in those wanting to go to jail, so to speak, without coming out and saying so, that's gonna hit that budget line pretty quickly, and that's gonna be another evaluation that will give us a clue, so.
Yes, Emily.
I just wanted to bring up the issue again about it. My sense is that the community and any of us are probably far more concerned about the people who are actually committing crimes, whether it's setting a fire or having a fire where they shouldn't, or it's damaging property, or it's something, a crime against persons or whatever it is. And I just want to be sure as we're talking about all of this, that if there's anything that our police department or whoever thinks that is a barrier to really going after people for committing crimes, I want to be sure we address that. I have a feeling that this ordinance, if it's only really going to be applied to people who aren't committing crimes, who are just trespassing, that it may not be a very large number of people that we're talking about. If some of the trespassers are also shoplifters, if they've done other things, then you know, they're hopefully being dealt with in another way.
Most all of them are trespassed from properties for committing other crimes.
Right, right.
So that falls into a different bucket.
Could I,
But those who are committing more serious crimes are being charged with more serious
Yeah.
offenses.
Right.
In addition to.
Correct.
Could I ask what measures we would propose using at the year review? Like, how would we judge whether or not this is effective?
I would, speaking for myself, I would imagine that what we're asking for is for the police department and a municipal judge to come back before us and tell us their opinions of what are they seeing good from this ordinance? Is it neutral? Is having no effect? or are we seeing detrimental effects where people are trying to take advantage, game the system essentially? I mean, that's the concern, that we get people that want to game the system and get the free 5-day vacation or whatever, you know, but so that's how I imagine that we would.
And the prosecutor too, to see, you know, what her opinion is as far as how, if it helped or deterred anything in her process and stuff. too.
Sure, that would be good to add her to that list.
Would it be possible as well to get, I mean, I would assume we would also want the number of trespass complaints to go down as a result of this. Like that is something that we would expect to see if this was having a positive effect.
Perhaps it's awful, if you've looked at crime statistics, sometimes it's really noisy. And you see lots of changes that are not necessarily related to any cause and effect type situations. That's the way things happen. That's my opinion. So it might be hard to try and look at it statistically to see if we've had. You know, I think what we would have to, if we did this a year from now, we would have to rely on opinions.
I think you could get some statistics, more so on the court side would be more accurate though.
In terms of,
So like, for instance, if we went to a trespass complaint and we ended up seeing 5 individuals that were trespassing, if I were to provide you the statistic, that's 1 trespass complaint. But it's actually 5 defendants. Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely.
So then you start, I mean, so to put it on a quantitative amount of a certain crime wouldn't necessarily mean much, but if you saw it on the back end, it might be more.
The number of police contacts they have vary in terms of how many times they have to write a citation. So keeping data on contacts on the street is very challenging.
Sure.
They play hogs trying to keep track of that. So I think it'll be our statistics because they're finite.
Sure. And with the new case management system, that we approved in the budget for this year, hopefully that'll be a lot easier to get.
Well, I hope that we get a system that's in it.
Yes,
That's the goal.
yes.
And we do have a new pad system, but that does require
It won't
essentially
be
call through the center to be recorded.
right, and the software, the implementation time on the software is not like it was stretched over the year.
Right. But we're running this within digital. Okay, so what's our sense on this? I think. So should do you want to do a thumbs up? Go around and do a thumbs up, or what would you like to do?
Try and make it a pinky.
Neutral?
Yeah. I guess I'll give it a thumbs up with the caveats that we've talked about.
I don't really count. I don't have a vote.
You don't have a vote, that's correct, but we would love to hear your opinion.
She doesn't want
And
to.
if it's a neutral, that's all right too.
And I'm gonna give it a thumbs up. Basically to give our police department another tool. A tool that no offense, but I don't see a lot of bite in. I don't see a lot of gain in this, and I do see the possible liability of this costing the city more than it was gonna be worth. But, you know, since we are gonna monitor that, we can monitor it and change it at a future date.
I think it's definitely worth a try with monitoring in a budget cap. And, you know, probably within a year, the police department should know more, and certainly the court. So, yeah, I think it's worth a try. If nothing else, that, you know, we are trying something a little different to try to tackle this, challenge.
Amy?
With judicial discretion, prosecutorial discretion, monitoring the spending cap, et cetera, I'm very neutral. But very supportive of our police department and.
Yeah.
Right.
And Emily?
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth in my own mind. I'm fine with trying this. Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's going to have the effect that people want it to have. Maybe, and law enforcement can tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe part of the value would be that an officer could say to someone who's getting their first citation, hey, you get convicted on this and then you get ordered, to not trespass again. Here's the consequence that you could face. I don't know if that would have a deterrent effect or any kind of an effect, but that I see that as maybe a piece of that tiny tool.
Well, thank you, Emily. And basically, I agree with what's been said. There are ways this can go wrong, but I think with appropriate monitoring, we will have another bite at this because before we would pass this, we would want to see budgetary numbers and see where we are.
We say also seeking to see if we could even find a defense attorney willing. to
Yeah,
take
that's a
us on
good
this.
point, and that's a good point too, can we reasonably provide some with defense attorney?
Yeah, that was good.
Point, paying for both sides, that's just,
I was
doesn't
just-
seem right,
I think my strongest statement would be to reiterate what Councilmember, sorry, Commissioner said, is that we can't just check a box off and say,
Nope, right.
like, we really do need to be looking for tools to actually address homelessness, especially for those that are committing crimes in our community.
Sure.
And I just want that strong statement to be that we are still seeking any tools we can to help us solve homelessness on any count that we can.
And I agree with that, that seems right to me. Is that good enough, Brian? Is that good enough?
No, it's back in your court.
Yeah.
We'll put something together and bring it back to council. Like I said, it'll probably take us about a month to make sure that we've.
So seeing you.
Because we're gonna have to draft additional documentation to go along with it regarding the budget.
Okay. And with that, I think unless someone has other words of wisdom for us, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Thank